Let's discuss FTP, SSH, and Telnet. These are protocols that can be used to move files back and forth between systems and remotely control those systems with various commands. The File Transfer Protocol, FTP, allows computers to transfer files back and forth. When you connect to an FTP server, that FTP server by default will have port 21 open. Some type of FTP client software is necessary to connect to the FTP server. This can be done in the command line within the FTP shell or by using a GUI-based application such as FileZilla. However, default FTP is not considered secure today. So the default FTP is not considered secure. Instead, organizations will usually prefer SFTP, which we'll describe in a little bit, or File Transfer Protocol Secure, FTPS, which utilizes ports 989 and 990. And let's show a little bit of the FTP in action. You can connect in the command line, as I mentioned, and to do that, we would run the FTP command. That'll put us into the FTP shell, and then you have to connect to the server that you want. So, for example, we'd use the open command, and I'll go to davidlprouse.com, press enter. It welcomes me in, and then it requests a user. So I've created a test FTP account called test, and most of the time you have to do the name kind of like an email account, test at, and the domain. So we'll do that and press enter and type in our password. And we're in. And it tells you current restricted directory is /. So it's the root, but it's just the root for this particular user. This user doesn't have any escalated privileges of any kind. It's just a test user. And you can run all of these commands here, and you can see them by typing the question mark. So we can get files, we can deposit files. This is all done with Linux/Unix type commands. It's all FTP commands. So you can do this in the command line. And you can see we are connected on port 21. But you can also do this with a program like FileZilla. So here I'm running FileZilla Pro. Standard FileZilla is free. Pro comes with a cost. But you can see here that I did indeed connect to the same server. And you can see I connected to the IP. And it did connect to port 21, but it did actually initialize TLS afterward. And then it verified that certificate, which is what we want. We want that TLS connection so it could be encrypted. But it's better to do this encryption from the get-go and connect with, say, an SFTP. And so SFTP, Secure File Transfer Protocol, can be done with SSH. It rides on SSH on port 22. So Secure Shell, that enables data to be exchanged between computers on a secured channel. And I put secure in quotation marks here because, it's really relatively secure. Nothing is ever 100% secure. But it's relatively secure, especially compared to a default FTP connection. So this protocol offers a more secure replacement to FTP and especially Telnet. The secure shell server that's housing the data that you want to access or the server that you want to manipulate would have to have port 22 open. And so there are several other protocols that use SSH. As I mentioned, Secure FTP or SFTP. That is one that you definitely would want to get into. And that instead of using standard FTP or FTPS, you would use SFTP on port 22, and it rides on SSH. And I use that for a lot of customers and for my publisher and so on. We use SFTP connections that utilize SSH. So as I mentioned, regular FTP can be insecure even if you're using a TLS connection after the fact. So SFTP combats this by providing file access over a reliable data stream that's protected by SSH. And so another program that you can use to remotely control systems using SSH, this goes beyond FTP, is a program called PuTTY. And here I have two systems. I've got a server that is running SSH. It's a Linux box. And what I did was I used PuTTY here. I used the PuTTY program to connect to that server via this IP address and log into that server and then start having a lot of fun. I start controlling that server remotely from Windows. So it's a great way to connect to all kinds of systems as long as they have SSH running and you know the correct login to get into that system. And finally, we have Telnet. Telnet, short for Telecommunications Network, which by default uses port 23. This provides remote access to hosts as well using the command line interface, but it's considered insecure. It's considered a deprecated protocol. However, some companies might still use it to access routers and other hosts or to test and manage network connectivity. So you might see a question about it on the exam. Generally, it's disabled, if it even exists in the operating system. And if you're wondering if it is enabled in Windows, you can do a quick check for it in the Services Console window. And so let me give you an example of that. Okay, here we have Windows 7. This is running in a virtual machine. We'll go to the run prompt and type services.msc. That brings up the Services Console window and go down to T, and you can see there is no Telnet service running here. Now, you can actually run it on Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10. And so here on this Windows 10 system, what we would do if we did want to run it, or if we needed to turn it off, we would go to our control panel. And I'm looking at the icons view, all control panel items. You go to Programs and Features, and from there, go to Turn Windows Features On or Off. That brings up the Windows Features, and then here we have the Telnet clients. So generally, it's considered insecure. It can be dangerous. It can be used for a lot of things that you might not want people to do. So that is off by default. But if you do need to turn it off, you could do it here. If you just need it to be turned off temporarily, but you might want to use it later, you could do that in the services window if it was running. Okay? But generally, Telnet's considered insecure, so we keep that closed or disabled most of the time. And so those are three more protocols that you want to know for the exam. FTP, which utilizes port 21. And its more secure version, FTPS, which uses 989 and 990. SSH, which uses port 22. And Telnet, which uses port 23. So really 4 protocols there. But 3 types of protocols that you need to know for the exam. And that's it for this video.